Senator Fawcett. Senator Fawcett.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I too rise to address this urgency motion. I'd just like to address firstly some of the comments that have been made by members opposite about the provisions in the budget. The pay that's made in the ADF obviously has annual increases, and I noticed going back to ASPE's figures that the increases have ranged over the last decade from a high under the coalition of around 6.1%, and the figure of 1.5% has in fact occurred previously as well, and a range in between. The interesting part in the ASPE figures is that in net terms the increase of pay continues over that decade, and it has been in the order of 110% over that decade increase, well above the CPI increase of 75%, or roughly 75% over the same period. And the reason I want to bring that out is that the increase, the provisions that have to be made for the increasing wage bill for the ADF is not just a matter of the increase to the base wage, but if you look at the pay rates in the ADF, not only is there a base wage, but there are increments of pay depending on time of service and seniority, but also as people gain additional qualifications, there are increments such that between a pay group 1 for a private, which is around 43,700, through to pay group 10, as they get additional qualifications or experience, that goes up to 78,799. So there's a range of factors that actually influence every year the growing wage bill that has to be provided for by the government, and the indexation of wages, the base rate of wage, is purely one. So I just wanted to take the time to address that point because it's been raised by a number of speakers opposite, and they clearly don't actually understand the construct of the ADF pay system and why certain provisions are made, and that growth provision is not all related to the base wage and the indexation. I'd also like to address the concerns that have been raised in a number of emails that we are cutting the pay of people who are putting their lives on the line. People who are deployed are still in receipt of the allowances that they receive, recognising not only their base wage, but recognising the fact that they have been deployed, and particularly those who are deployed into a warlike situation. And so we have our intelligence organisations that make an assessment of the level of threat, such that somebody who's been deployed, for example, in Operation Slipper, receives an additional $200 a day while they're there, ranging down to people who are supporting operations in Ukraine, for example, around $137 a day additional. And for those who are in a warlike situation, not only are those additional payments made, but they are tax-free while those people are being deployed. And so we are recognising in a very tangible way, and this has occurred under governments of both persuasions, so there's no politics in this. Under governments of both persuasions, we have recognised when people are doing things that do place them at an elevated risk. And it's not only those who deploy, people who remain here in Australia often undertake dangerous work, and so the ADF pay structure makes suitable allowance for them. So, for example, somebody in the Special Forces just having an SAS qualification, there's an additional $38,000 that's paid to them for having that qualification. Likely someone who's a clearance diver, an additional $20,000. Somebody who's in the explosive special duty area, particularly if they're in the render safe area, an additional $14,500 that is paid to them in recognition of the fact that they are doing duty over and above the ordinary day-to-day work that they are required to undertake. I'd just like to talk quickly also about the terms of this urgency motion, which talked about the reduction of conditions. These conditions Defence has looked at in terms of saying how can they increase productivity with minimal impact on people. And so some of the things that we're looking at here, for example, the threshold for getting HDA, less than 1% of the claims of higher duty allowances were for periods of less than 5 days. The vast majority were in excess of the 10-day limit. And yet, ADF has sustained two systems which has costs through the administration. So by rationalising that, which has a very small impact, less than 1%, you achieve savings. And so some of these measures that have been criticised as a dramatic reduction in entitlements for people are not as dramatic as seen. One that I do want to raise, though, and I have raised concerns about this with the Assistant Minister, is those who are married with dependents on a separated posting. I have a constituent in South Australia who is in this situation where she and her husband, who's a serviceman, made a decision as a family based on the paying conditions that were available at the time to accept a posting where he was separated from his family. And I've been in that situation myself, my service life, where I've taken a posting away from family. And you make decisions about your ability to be reunited, to travel, go back and see your family, based upon what you're going to be receiving in terms of allowances. And so, under the current arrangement, a family in that situation will actually see a reduction in income. Now, Defence has a system in place. Chapter 3, Part 2, Div 5 of the Pac-Man actually looks at salary non-reduction provisions, and in Para 3239 it says that the purpose of this is to set out the way that a member's salary can be reserved for a period when it would otherwise be reduced. And my strong contention here is that this is a classic case where Defence needs to apply these provisions, which they already have, such that a member and their family who have made a decision around postings and geographic locations for a period of a posting, if they are impacted by this change, will receive a non-reduction allowance. So for the period of that posting, they will be no worse off. At the end of that posting, they can make their decision then whether they wish to relocate together, whether they wish to go through under the new arrangements. But given that decision was made under existing pay and condition arrangements, then I would be strongly encouraging Defence to apply an NRA. I don't believe they've actually made a decision on whether it will be or not, but the Pac-Man certainly allows for it. I think it's a very clear case where the existing provision should be applied so that no member of the Defence Force is worse off in that tangible way because of this pay outcome.